Hello, my name's Ben.
And my name's Josh.
Welcome back to FPL graduates and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be looking at a free hit. A lot of managers starting the season by using as many of their chips as possible. So we're going to have a look into a potential free hit team and start going into the processes and the players that we think you should potentially be looking at going into this game week.
Okay, then, yes. So free hit game week two seems like a decent strategy for using this chip. Obviously, you're going to want to use it in this first half of the season where your team isn't going to be looking as optimal as maybe other game weeks. And I think that's definitely the case this week. Obviously, with Burnley and Sunderland playing each other, it gives you that opportunity to maybe attack other fixtures that you wouldn't usually be attacking in your team. And yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. So getting into the team to start off, obviously Dubravka's in goal. We've cheaped out in the goalkeeper position just because I think there's a decent chance of a clean sheet for that in that game for Burnley. Obviously, it's their first home game of the season. Sunderland did just score 3 goals, but definitely not expecting that every week. Obviously, they only created 0.6 xg in that game, so a big overperformance from them, but a great performance nonetheless. Obviously, overall, so I'd be happy playing Dubravka this week. To be honest, if I owned him with that Sunderland fixture. In the back line, obviously, we've got Saliba, Cucurella, and Senesi, all with very good fixtures. Obviously, two of them being at home. I think having some Arsenal coverage in defence is an absolute minimum. You could even argue about a double up against that Leeds side. Obviously, again, they did sort of challenge Everton in that game, but nothing sort of too glaringly obvious that they're cutting through them and everything like that. So I think an Arsenal team that defended United very, very well will keep a clean sheet in game week two. Cucurella obviously offers that attacking threat compared to Defcon, which I think is something different and something to look at against that West Ham side who seem to struggle, especially in transition against Sunderland, which will be an interesting one to watch. And then Senesi, obviously for Defcon, is really good against that Wolves side who obviously, again, weren't too great going forwards in game week one. What's your thoughts on that, Ben?
Yeah, I mean it's a solid backline and look, I don't think you need to go too expensive on the keeper this week if you're free hitting. Start putting those funds into the attack because we're going to need to use them for some of the assets later on in the video. Yeah, I do think as well Arsenal coverage is absolutely required in this. A defensive double up is maybe sort of more favourable to start the season than an attacking double up, just because we've seen in previous years Arsenal can be very resolute and defensive, and the numbers are very much elite. There's a couple of unknowns still within that Arsenal attack, so if you want to swap out Cucurella for an Arsenal defender, then I see no reason why you couldn't do that. And then, yeah, like I said, the Bournemouth game against Wolves looks to be a decent one. Let's see how that game plays out. Hopefully not as transitional as the Bournemouth's opening game. But again, like they didn't look horrendous defensively, so definitely options there. You could even go for Bournemouth's new defender in there, Gyokeres instead. So there's definitely options in there at that 4.5 million price point. If you're thinking about Defcon as well, you could look at Richards with the Forest game at home, a very tight game. We saw, last game week, the tighter games produce more Defcon points. So, yeah, that spot really at 4.5, it could be sort of a number of players there.
Yeah, obviously you've got Lacroix on the bench as well. You could even downgrade Senesi to a 4 and then bring in Daniel Munoz if you fancied him for some attack and returns. Like there's a whole host of options in that third spot. I just think Cucurella and Saliba almost auto pitch. You could even argue Gabriel. I don't think Saliba will probably get as many defcons against that lead side. You imagine Arsenal will probably control the game a lot more than what they did at Old Trafford. So yeah, you could even argue for some attacking threat from Gabriel too.
Okay, so moving on into the midfield, and this is where we start putting in a bit more funds into the team. Start off with the stand-up player from game week one, in my opinion, and that was Antoine Semenyo. Played fantastically well. The game was set up perfectly for him against Liverpool in transition, and the fixture this week falls quite nicely from an attacking perspective. So do expect him to start and play well in that one. Reinders, of course, like again. We'll have to wait and see what system Pep plays. Could be a really good option going into this game week. Tottenham will look to sit back and it should be a game that City control. I do see a lot of DEFCON points available and on offer within this fixture. Bukayo Saka in at captaincy at the moment. He's projected to be the sort of second highest scoring player of the game week. So, I think he's a fairly decent option to go into this game week, albeit potentially not on penalties. But as Josh has said in a previous video, that's not the end of the world anyway, because we haven't seen, Saka heavily rely on penalties too much previously. And then Morgan Rogers to round up the midfield. I think this is more based on Brentford's inability to defend in game week 1 rather than Aston Villa's ability to attack in game week 1. So, Josh, that's the midfield there, fairly stacked out. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you got two of the hottest midfielders in the game at the minute in Semenyo and Reinders. Obviously, both already risen in price. I think Reinders is definitely going to start this week. I'd just be so shocked to see him bench. So, yeah, fairly confident in him. And obviously, like you mentioned, we expect City to dominate that game from a possession point of view. So, yeah, I'd expect him to have the fair share of that like we saw against Wolves. Saka on the captaincy, you could go for a different player that we'll get onto in a moment. I just think from open play, he should be that guy sort of creating, being the sort of instrumental guy compared to the game week 1 where he wasn't really involved too much, but he just wasn't needed to be involved too much with the way that Arsenal's game plan sort of went out in that game. So, yeah, I wouldn't be too worried about that game week 1 performance on him. And yeah, as Ben mentioned, it's definitely more of a Brentford thing than a Rodgers thing for picking him this week. But there are a whole host of options that you could potentially choose from at 7 mil and under. Okay, then. So, yeah, a very expensive front three we're going with. Victor Gyokeres is up first. Obviously, not the best performance, let's be honest, in game week 1 against United. But at the same time, I wasn't really expecting much more. Like, it was going to be a tough game regardless for all players involved, and that's what we saw. It was only a 1-0 game. I think against a Leeds side, yes, they're going to be very physical. We've seen that just from Leeds' transfer window with the amount of height they've brought into their team, quite literally. I still think he's got, he'll still have a chance. Like we've mentioned, he's probably got penalties over Saka, is what's being reported, especially out of Swedish outlets anyway. So, yeah, I'd definitely consider him if I was on free hit this week. And it's just a case of whether you want to go double defence or chase the upside for the double attack against a newly promoted side. That is totally up to you. You could go for Evan Nilsson, potentially, if you wanted to downgrade him elsewhere. Obviously, Ollie Watkins is next. Again, it's a similar thing with the Brentford away fixture. It should be not Newcastle at home. Brentford looked terrible, and I expect Aston Villa to do much better than what they did against Newcastle. I think that was more of a case of how well Newcastle played rather than how poor Aston Villa were going forward. So we'll see how that pans out this weekend. And then obviously Erling Haaland's in there off the back of his brace. It could be an interesting one for potentially captaincy. I own Saka and Haaland myself. I'd prefer to captain Saka, A, because he's a midfielder, and B, just because I just can't really see how this game's going to go with that Thomas Frank system. I think it's going to be a lot harder than what Man City Tottenham games have been like in the past in terms of getting goals in them. So, yeah, for me, that's my choice on the captaincy. Probably not Ben's choice. He can discuss that now.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the Haaland option, it's definitely still an option for captaincy, and like based off the brace last week, you can't discount that, but you also sort of need to bear in mind the systems that Haaland's coming up against, and look. If it was Tottenham last year, it's the perfect fixture for him this year with a different manager. It's a different completely outlooks on that. So yeah, and then like I said, Watkins is going to be a fantastic option. Looks very good in pre-season, and of course didn't quite get the return. Had a couple of shots on target. Looked fairly dangerous in parts, and then yeah, Gyokeres is going to be like that outside pick that on a free hit will make the difference. And yeah, he could be on penalties, which really adds to the appeal there, because Leeds at home, it screams of a penalty going in somewhere along the line. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see. In a very strong strike force that should be well set up should you be looking to free hit this week.
Okay, then so that wraps up the best free hit in mine and Ben's opinion for game week 2. Let us know what you think of it in the comments and whether you are going to hit the chip for game week 2.
Yeah, absolutely. And as always, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to the FPL graduates. I've been Ben.
I've been Josh.
And we'll see you guys
next time. Have a good game week, everyone.
So you may rise, but you'll never make me